Assalamu alaikum. This is lecture number 6. It's in our course State Organizations Management إدارة المنظمات الحكومية for the English section, Accounting Department, Level 3, Faculty of Commerce, Zagazig University. Dr. Ahmad Amhawi is lecturing. We will discuss this in this lecture, chapter 3. It's about the anatomy of public organization, bureaucratic power and politics. It's mainly a completion of what we have started in chapter 2 when we were introducing the systems thinking for public administration. In chapter 2 we introduced the system thinking and the external context of systems in public administration. This chapter we will deal with the internal part of the system, which mainly deal with the bureaucracy and bureaucratic power and culture and policies inside the organizations. The main outline of the chapter: culture, ideology, bureaucracy, the cognitive process. These are how people think and deal with issues inside the organization. Bureaucratic power, the organizational structure. You see, these are internal matters. Bureaucrats and politicians, these are inside the organizations as well. Politicians inside, not the outside ones. And how such things are dealt with as internal sources of value. You remember in our course we talked about values, and it's the main theme of our course, how such things provide values that affect decision making and management of public administration. Let's start with an introduction of the internal sources. You see, we said that this is system thinking. This is the internal part of a public administration as a system. So what might be the internal sources of value? Here in our introduction, we say that internal sources of value can be introduced, or the main parties play important roles for that introduce internal sources are like the management of the place, الإدارة بتاعت المحافظة، الإدارة بتاعت الوزارة، الإدارة بتاعت مجلس المدينة, and so on, especially the higher levels ones. Also elected politicians, they are important internal sources, and the lower levels or the mid levels, we are talking about public employees here. Values shape the organization approach to problem solving. This is one important part that shows here in this note, that internal values are mainly deal with how such organizations solve their problems, deal with day-to-day events or the managerial issues that are the short range, mid-range, and long range. Internal sources affect such programming of mind of the organization. يعني برمجة الدماغ بتاعت for the organization, the collective brain, يعني المخ الجمعي بتاع أي تنظيم, which are introduced in management textbooks in culture, ideology, and cognitive process as well. So organizational culture, bureaucratic ideology are critical to the organization value systems. They represent what we call here in our chapter internal sources of value. Such things provide what is called here political support. They are used to maintain political support to respond to what people demand. Here is what we talk about: political support to deal with what people demand from such organizations. Before we continue in our chapter, we will have a stop at a term that we will see in our chapter. It's about the cognitive process or the cognitive model in general. We will present some quick model for the cognition. uh, يعني if you look to cognition in your dictionary you will find it uh, uh, its translation is معرفة أو فكر أو something like this يعني. However, it's more complicated than that. It's cognition. It's how people do many things. How they think. It's not only think. It's how they receive information. الفلتر جهاز الاستقبال of what they see around them, events around them, and information they read, and after that how they retrieve previous experiences and information they had before retrieving knowledge from memory. Whenever you receive some information you compare it with something that you had before. So this is another process that is related to what we trying to explain here, the term cognition. And then when you compare, you begin to do what is a very important process here. It's the thinking things. In thinking, you compare between what you had before and what is new that you see in life. Information or events or whatever you read or experience and so on. Yeah. In thinking, you compare. In thinking, you understand. In thinking, you are preparing yourself to the next stage, which is judging. Judging here, into you are uh, 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 coming up with viewpoints, with judgments, some ideas, some decisions, some conclusions, some plans of what you're gonna do based on the previous three levels. And after you implement such decisions, you make what happened, you make what you came up with implemented in real life. There is another important process which is called here learning. And you are storing the experiences that you had or any information, new information you had out of such stages. All these stages, all these processes are related to a very complicated term. It's called cognition. Why are we introducing this? Because internal sources of values in public administrations highly related to how people think, how their cognitive processes work in such organizations. This is why we said that let's have a stop, quick one, about what we mean by cognition. Let's complete our chapter. Chapter is about the internal aspects or sources of values in public administration. Beside cognitive processes, we have what is called here culture. Culture affect cognitive process of the organization. Do you remember culture? We had culture in many courses in management before. Okay, translation is ثقافة, but I need the meaning. I need the give me a definition or something. We will introduce such definition in the following slides, but for the present time, for now, I'm sorry, we say that culture is about the programming of mind of a group of people that is consists of or constitute their beliefs, their traditions, their way of thinking of and judgment, and their ethics, their aesthetic values, and so on. Such the mix of such things together, they program their mind in a way, and they make their behavior formed in such way, in some way that differ than other people that have different cultures. So such organizations, one important source of their values is the culture that affect their cognitive process. And we talked about process, cognitive processes here, these five processes. Uh, Bureaucratic power, of course. Power, احنا we talk about نفوذ, influence public policy development and implementation. This is another important source of values. They are power, bureaucratic power one. We have also in our introduction in such a chapter other important sources of internal values such as the budget, needs, and constraints. Of course, if we have specific limits for how much money do we have for the future, that affect our values. If we have some constraints or some needs, that will affect our internal sources of value. The need for efficiency, and we talked about this. This is mal'am. Mal'am needs efficiency. You need to make no mistakes. You need to waste any public money. So this is برضو another important source. It's a value. Preserving أو الحفاظ على المال العام is a very important value, internal one in public administration. Also codes of ethics, مواثيق الأخلاق, is very important internal source of value in such organizations, level of morale of members. And here we are talking about the individual ethical values, not the collective one. Powerful units. If we have some departments, some sectors are more powerful than the other, their values prevail or affect other values in such organizations. We finished our introduction. Let's deal with our topics here in that chapter. The first important and the most important source of values, أول نقطة يعني في الشابتر هي الorganizational culture. طبعا احنا we studied this in OB course in level 1, المستوى الأول لما دخلنا الكلية يعني. We define culture here, formal definition in our chapter, a complex interlinking of assumptions, norms, attitudes. You see too many things, beliefs, values, and you can add other things as well, aesthetic values, even dress code. يعني انت تلبس ازاي, even the food culture. All these collectively guide the organization, form or channel their behavior in some way or another. This is why culture is important, and it's very important internal source of values in any organization, not only the public administration organizations. The way an organization views its role with the society also as well part of came or its main source is culture. Bureaucrats are made, not born. This is a very important term we have here. Are made, that means that organizational culture affect them and made them in such way. They are not, if they come with some way of thinking, some beliefs, some values, such values get reshaped and affected because their organization have a different or a very strong culture. That means members acquire the dominating culture in the organizations. فيا جماعة دايما الكالتشر بتبقى قوية. They are very strong and they affect. So this is what we call it هنا, bureaucrats are made. Why made? Because of the culture. It becomes their main source of understanding. I'm talking about culture. Their main source of understanding and gives routines to deal with certain problem. One important thing about culture is that they reduce the need to authority, rules, and control. Without referring, in some circumstances, if you have some rules or authority that contradict with your culture may override such rules or authorities. It's like a given hand or a hidden hand, I'm sorry, that affect how people behave in organizations. Of course, culture has positive and negative effects, especially if you have positive culture, that would be something good for us. If you have an organization that has a friendly culture, a cooperative culture, team working culture, that would be something very good. But in the other side, if you have Aggressive culture, people that uh, hustle, and they don't respect customers, they don't respect their fellows, and it's a culture in the organization that would affect and decrease the possibilities of success of any organization. Um, let's move to the following point. A sub component of culture is called here group thinking، اللي هو التفكير الجمعي او الجماعه او uh, let me give you an example. يعني if you are in a group, uh, your behavior tend to follow what the group is doing. يعني this is what's called group thinking. When they discuss something, the first thoughts introduced in a group, usually people follow such thoughts. لو حد اخترع حاجة, everyone think in such initial or first thought. People, groups are very strong. If you deviate, they force you to get back in track with what the group wants and they are thinking about. So group thinking, according to the definition we have here, is a mode of thinking within a group. It's people seek consensus. You see, group thinking make some consensus here, اتفاق يعني, with no appraisal of alternative course of action. طبعا أحد أعراض بقى الجروب thinking ده, they always have this such illusion of invulnerability. معناها هنا يعني هم عندهم وهم كده ان طالما انت في وسط الجماعة مش هيحصل لك حاجة يعني. even they did something wrong, يعني لو انت مع مجموعة وراحوا يسرقوا وانت سرقت معاهم ما بتخافش because you are in the group. If you are alone, you wouldn't do that, right? The second thing, or the second symptom we have here, ignoring warnings or other types of negative feedbacks. That is part of the symptoms. If you are in a group and you felt you got some negative feedback of what is happening, you usually ignore such things. You are in the group. Why considering such feedbacks? Deep belief in the moral correctness of the group. دايما انت you believe in that they are right. Negative views about the leaders of out groups. Whoever is outside, I feel negative about him. Avoidance of any deviation. I said that before. If anybody deviated from the group, people will force him to come back and be in track. Quick application of pressure to conform to the group. Shared illusion of consensus of opinions. Establishment of mind guards. مخك بيبقى متقفل. There are mind guards around you. Think with the group. This is part of the secret of culture, thinking in collective way. In that slide we are still talking about culture, and we will compare between two types of cultures. I mean, in that slide we are introducing comparison between two types of culture. Culture, internal ones, the one we have in that chapter, and the culture from the outside, اللي هو the context of the public administration that we dealt with in the previous chapter. This table, the left side one, we are talking about the external, and that one is the internal. The external one, we will call it the pluralist, the political system, the people around us. There are political pressures, and such context has its own cultural themes here, points or dimensions. And in the opposite, we have here another aspects of the internal one. Let's see the comparison between such organizational culture, the right side one, and the societal, or the what we call it here, political. The textbook called it pluralist or political system culture here. To the left one, the pluralist power is should be dispersed and decentralized. يعني الناس برا السياسيين people outside they consider that it's very important that power given to public organization should be decentralized. Decentralized in order to have more efficient and more power owned by people, by الشعب. While in the inside, they prefer that power should be centralized against decentralization that we have here, and should be concentrated in order to be more efficient. You see, it's called here efficiency. Type. And the other one, executive power. الناس اللي معاهم السلطة in public they are regarded with suspicious. يعني احنا بنشك في الناس اللي معاهم السلطة في while inside the organization they respect whoever has the power. They are counting people and they are people of respect. You see, there are different culture we have here. Power should be given here to politicians. Power should be given here to experts. Political bargaining and accumulation at the heart of the democratic process. In the opposite side, we need efficiency. احنا محتاجين هنا كفاءة. If we talked about politics, we will waste money and we will waste time. This is the culture. يعني you see here, culture is the how people think and believe in what their values are. So you see the values we have here: centralization, accountability, power to the experts, efficiency, and also as well we emphasize here technical part. Here we have individual assesses his or her own interests. We have هنا individuals interests, الناس, الفرد, and so on. So this table is very important in our chapter that contrast and show the differences between two important types of cultures. The last slide we have in our lecture here, it's called the culture, the use of symbols, how culture is raised and accumulated and become effective and communicated, as we see here, through what people say, word phrases, their anthems, their gestures, their يعني according to the slide we have here, ثقافة any تنظيم come from formal part and informal part. Formal part, whatever plans they thought of and implemented, structures, their goals, strategies, كل الحاجات اللي عملوها رسمي in the organizations affect their culture. If they always plan that way and they have their plans that way and they have their objectives and strategies that way, that affect their programming of mind. But there is another part of a culture that is communicated through words, faces, anthems, gestures, and so on. That is informal communication one. ايه بقى بتيجي من ايه؟ من how people live, their stories, their events, their sagas, their ceremonies, their ritual, their messes, الحاجات الخرافات والحكايات والإشاعات you see all these affect their culture. يعني بتخلي الناس بتفكر بطريقة معينة يعني. All these help members deal with complexities and reduce uncertainty in organizations. You know, in organizations life, they have lots of uncertainty. How they deal with such, how they react, how they make decisions, how they respond to this through their culture. Their mind thinking that way. So whenever they face such problem, they deal with it. So it's what's said here in our text. They reduce uncertainty by how their minds are have such culture. دي كانت نهاية المحاضرة بتاعتنا. إن شاء الله in the next lecture we will complete chapter 3. Thank you.